Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me here on the Being Beautifully Honest channel. And I am excited. I'm going to be having a conversation with attorney Dmitry Shaknovich, and I wanted to discuss the Ashley Grayson case with him. He is a criminal and civil litigation attorney. But before we get into the conversation, I'm just going to allow you, Dmitry, just to go ahead and introduce yourself to those who are new to the channel.
Sure. Appreciate you having me. My name is Dmitry Shaknovich. I'm a criminal and civil lawyer here in New York City. I'm also a professor at a criminal justice college here in New York. And in addition to that, I have a YouTube channel and an online presence and a website. www.dshacklaw is my website. My YouTube channel is at dshacklaw. Folks who are interested in the law and discussions about the law should certainly take a look.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your knowledge because listen, this story was one that was a little bit crazy. Now, I will say I heard about Ashley Grayson. I want to say I heard about her for the first time maybe about 9 or 10 months ago. And I'm not someone who is on social media a great deal, even though I do create content from time to time. I just don't really have a lot of time to see all of the different people that are big online because they have these people that they call internet entrepreneur gurus. They sell courses and products, and some of them make a lot of money doing that. And it's in a way, for some of them, they have the gift of gab, and they're able to really swoon people because they share what they want to share, the best part of themselves, the best part of what they want to sell in order to make money. And she appears to be someone that was able to do that. But it seems that the the I guess internet fame that she was able to garner may have gotten to her head, and so much to the point where she decided that some people that were critiquing her online needed to be put out for eternity. And it's absolutely crazy to me when I heard the story. But listen, guys, Ashley Grayson, I'm just going to share the screen with you all and get a little bit into her story and why she has been charged for, she's been indicted for a murder for hire plot. So for me, that's new because there are a lot of people that are online that are making lots of money, but I don't think I've ever heard of one that decided that someone that was critiquing them, making videos about them and posts about them on social media needed to be put to sleep forever, literally. So Ashley Massengill Grayson and her husband, Joshua Grayson, have been formally charged by the United States, the FBI, in connection to the murder for hire plot that the two allegedly hatched. They are facing charges of racketeering and murder under the Rico Act of 1970. And the expectation from many is that the pair will end up spending time behind bars, as Rico charges are notoriously difficult to beat, especially without an attorney that adopts an aggressive strategy to challenge the mountain of evidence that will undoubtedly be collected by the federal government. In September 2020, it appeared Ashley Grayson was a rising star in the entrepreneurial space following her claim of making $1 million in less than an hour, as we previously reported. And the story comes from Black Enterprise. That must be pretty nice to make $1 million in less than an hour. I don't know anyone else has really been able to do that. But according to Yahoo News, a woman named Sherelle accused Massengill Grayson of scamming her out of $2,000 and claimed that the $1 million figure she touted was greatly exaggerated. Sherelle also claimed that Massengill got her money from a workers' compensation settlement and not her actual business. Several other users also claimed that they too were scammed by Massengill Grayson and her husband. Massengill Grayson herself later confirmed that her fortunes changed following a workers' comp settlement after she lost a finger working on an assembly line. And on April 4th, 2023, Ashley petitioned the United States District Court in Oxford, Mississippi to dismiss a defamation lawsuit brought by Derica Harwell. In the court documents, it is revealed that FBI agents informed Harwell that Massengill Grayson, on or around September 26, 2022, that the influencer had attempted to hire a contract killer, i.e., a hitman, to kill her. As a result of this very serious threat to her life, the FBI requested and then subsequently placed Harwell under their protection, moving her from her home. Crazy. Harwell makes a number of claims in the lawsuit, chief among them that Massengill Grayson sent her harassing and threatening direct messages on Facebook Messenger. Grayson made an attempt to dox Harwell, which means put her private information publicly. And in an attempt to cover up the murder for hire investigation, Massengill Grayson is attempting to sue the multiple victims of her alleged murder for hire plot for defamation. Grayson alleged that she had to get a restraining order placed on Harwell due to defamatory remarks Harwell made on her Facebook page, a post that went viral. The court ruled that there was no merit for Grayson's motion to dismiss Harwell's suit and that the two sides of the story are so far apart that another court would have to decide which one of them was telling the truth and which one was lying. Ultimately, however, this court suspects that the competing allegations made by Ms. Grayson and Ms. Harwell will prove to be so irreconcilable with each other that it will be left to a jury to determine who is lying and who is telling the truth. So this court offers no opinion on this matter, since its role in this case is not to serve as the trier of fact, but merely to determine whether triable fact issues exist. At this juncture, it rather strongly appears that they do. So based on this situation, Dmitry, and the fact that they, meaning her and her husband at this point in time, have been now charged, and I mean, this is absolutely crazy. What are your thoughts on this situation? And just share your thoughts about their indictment.
So there's a lot there. Let's begin at the very beginning. An indictment is not evidence of guilt, okay? An indictment is what comes about after what's called the grand jury process, right? In very serious cases in the US, it has been determined that because the punishments are so heavy in murder cases, so on and so forth, that an extra layer of protection is required for the defendant, meaning the government, prosecution, in between charging and trying a defendant, must do something else. And the grand jury is that step. Now, the indictment rates, depending on where you are in the country, are well over 90%, well over 95%. There's a reason for that. In the grand jury process, the defendant cannot put on evidence. The defendant cannot cross-examine, can't make objections. Typically, there's no judge, and if there is a judge, the judge can't do much. So an indictment really is considered by many a formality, right? That's why it's so easy to indict. That's why, for example, I would never recommend a client to testify before the grand jury, right? Because the indictment is virtually a foregone conclusion. So an indictment is something that sounds bad. It's not a good thing. Nobody wants to be indicted, but it's not evidence of anything. It's not evidence of any wrongdoing. Now, the indictment here shows that there was a charge for conspiracy, right? A scheme is an agreement between two people, right? To do something. Here, the conspiracy wasn't completed, which is why the charge isn't a lot more serious, right? If it was completed, now you're talking murder, and that's incredibly different. It's incredibly more serious. Here, you have a conspiracy to commit murder, which is also obviously a very serious crime. But in this particular case, we're so early on, we'll have to see what evidence the government has. Are there recordings? Are there other pieces of information that would lead to a conviction? Generally speaking, the federal authorities are very good in gathering evidence, right? The federal investigation agencies, FBI, DEA, CIA, you can go on and so forth. They're very good at gathering evidence. That's why the federal conviction rates are so high. So the fact that this case in federal court isn't great for Ashley Grayson, but nobody knows what the evidence will show, and nobody knows how ultimately the case will come about. That's kind of the soup to nuts story right now because it is that early on.
Gotcha. Okay. So I did see in the story where they said that they collected Facebook Messenger messages. There was someone that she actually sued for defamation. Ashley Grayson sued for defamation. They had to put this person under protection because of this hit that was, placed on her life. So obviously, they have this evidence against her. Now, when it comes to her and her husband and the charges, you said this is pretty serious because it's in federal court. So could this have been something that may not have wound up in federal court had it turned out a different way?
Well, the charging standards in federal court and in state courts and local courts aren't that different. Generally, it's probable cause or some variation of probable cause. Probable cause, as you may know, is a very low legal standard. So the charges may have been brought no matter where, but the federal agencies that investigate cases are incredibly thorough. A lot of money goes into those investigations, resources, manpower. So they do comprehensive work. And again, that is why it's, not preferable to go to federal court if you're a criminal defendant. So we'll see what those agencies have gathered over time. And obviously, the punishments here, the sentences, that will all depend. There's also two defendants here who will presumably hire two different lawyers, who should hire two different lawyers. That's the right way to do things.
Okay.
And nobody knows how that dynamic will go. So a lot of moving parts.
Okay. So that's interesting. You said that they should hire two different attorneys. Why is that, if you don't mind explaining?
Sure. Well, for a variety of reasons. A lot of folks are saying that why are they hiring two different lawyers? That doesn't look very good. Is there something that they're not telling us? Are the defenses inconsistent? In the law, there's an ethical doctrine called a conflict of interest, right? Conflict of interest is basically this idea that a lawyer cannot represent clients that may have adverse interests to one another. Criminal co-defendants, it's virtually a conflict of interest by definition. Wow. So if a lawyer will take on this case for both clients, while right now there may not be any inconsistency in the stories, that may change. And then not only will the lawyer be compromised, but the case will be compromised. So nobody, not the lawyer, not the defendants, not the criminal justice system, not the prosecutor, has an interest in that happening. So whenever you have co-defendants, two lawyers should always be retained.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. I don't think anyone really thought of it that way, especially since this is a husband and wife, a couple that are being charged together. I mean, I don't think most people would even have a second thought about them having separate counsel if they were not related to each other. But if they're husband and wife, some people may think, well, why would they need separate counsel? But the way you broke that down, that makes so much sense. Now, when it comes to the indictment and charges, we know there has been no trial yet. So is this something that they could possibly cut a deal on? And before you get to that, can you explain Rico first and foremost?
Sure. RICO is a broad federal statute that seeks to hold accountable members of a criminal enterprise, so long as, and the law varies, so long as the people being charged act in furtherance of the criminal enterprise. So it's used primarily for organized crime, for drug cartels, and for other drug organizations, for criminal enterprises, right? To make it so that you can charge any member of the enterprise for something that is done on behalf of the enterprise. And that really helps, because if you get a low-ranking member of some criminal enterprise and that person is charged under RICO, even though involvement may have been tangential in some particular crime, you can now use that person to cooperate against other people in the organization. So RICO is an incredibly effective criminal justice tool, and it's both a criminal and a civil tool. You could sue people under RICO. it's an expansive statute that the federal court system has used for years very successfully.
Gotcha. Okay, so would this be something that they could possibly cut a deal, for in terms of the charges that are, they're up against?
Sure. So most cases in America, and particularly in federal court, end in a plea. And when I say most, again, over 90%. And the reason for that, there are several reasons for it. The federal sentencing guidelines in some cases are restrictive. So if you go to trial, you may be punished more severely. But
Right.
beyond that, again, the federal courts and the federal investigative bodies do a really good job of investigating cases, right? If you watch a documentary from, uh, how the government investigated a mob case back in the 80s, you'll
Mm.
see grainy footage and you'll see very difficult, things to figure out. These days, everything is 4K. There are cell phones, there are advanced technological tools. The government does a good job in investigating cases, and particularly the federal government. And so that is why most cases don't go to trial,
Mm.
in my view.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense, the way you said it, because I don't know if it would be. I'm definitely not an attorney, but based on the information that's out there, I don't know if it would be advisable for them to, stand trial for this, because it sounds pretty serious. And I know this is on the criminal side, but based on the allegations that they attempted to have, well, I don't know if they were just critics of them or a competition for them or a combination of, when it comes to the Graysons and why they decided to attempt to do what they attempted to do. Would this be something that the victims could pursue civilly against the Graysons in court?
It's possible. In a civil case, the standards are different. In a civil
Right.
case, generally speaking, you have to prove damages. So when you sue
Mm.
somebody, rather than when somebody is charged with a crime, you sue them for a certain amount of money,
Right.
generally speaking,
Right.
and you have to prove why you're suing them for that amount of money. Here, you have this murder for hire plot, and the damages may be something in the vein of an emotional disturbance, emotional distress. That is hard to prove without a physical injury, depending on where you are in the country.
Mhm.
So, can somebody file a lawsuit? Yes. Um,
Right.
how successful it'll be, I don't know. But there are a lot of things about this I don't know. So, it's
Yeah.
possible.
Okay. And it's just something I thought about, because based on the fact that this woman and her husband claimed to be millionaires that were attempting to, pursue having these people taken out for whatever reasons, not saying they were, there would never be a good reason for doing that, but I know that we live in a country where we're heavily litigious, and like you said, you can file a lawsuit for anything at any time. Doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but if I didn't have the type of means that they have and millionaires were attempting to take me out, I definitely feel that that might be something I would want to pursue civilly as well. I'm definitely not saying they shouldn't be pursuing the criminal court, but again, they may cut a deal. Who knows if they will serve any time, because like you said, and we know based on the facts, they haven't physically had anything happen to them, thankfully, but I'm not sure what any type of financial damages they may have received, but I would definitely feel that if I knew someone tried to take me out, it would have affected me emotionally. So I was just curious as to whether that might be something they could pursue civilly as well.
They could. So, emotional distress damages, as you can imagine, is an area that gets really murky, right?
Hmm.
Physical damage is easier, right? You
Right.
have medical records, you have doctor's reports. Um, Emotional distress is murkier and harder to prove. And so many states, to deal with that, have implemented safeguards, right? Like I said, some have implemented a safeguard where you have to connect the emotional to the physical.
Mm.
Um, and again, you can litigate this case, but you will have to prove damages. That's important. That's something to keep in mind. And the good thing about a criminal case is if there's a conviction in a criminal case, you can typically use that in a civil case. So you know,
Yes, and that's what I was wondering. I'm definitely not advising them today to go and file a civil lawsuit,
no, 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 no.
but yeah, but if they did indeed plead guilty, or if they decided to take the risk, go through a trial, and are convicted, I would wonder if that in turn would be carte blanche for them to pursue a civil litigation against, them as well.
So in criminal court, the standard of proof for guilt is beyond a reasonable doubt, right? The highest standard we have in the law. In
Right.
civil cases, it's preponderance of the evidence, which basically means more likely than not.
Hmm.
So if there's a conviction in the criminal case, either by plea or a trial, then that information can be used in the civil case very compellingly.
Gotcha. Because I know this isn't the same situation, but what made me ask that question was I thought about the OJ Simpson case. And we know that he was found not guilty. He went through the trial, he was found not guilty. But the Ronald Goldman's his father, I believe, sued OJ in civil court and won in civil court. And so I know thankfully in this situation, no one's lives were touched, but I was just wondering because of that situation, how this might correlate, in a similar way. And that's what made me ask the question about could they pursue the Graysons in civil court? Even when OJ was found not guilty in criminal court, the Goldmans pursued him in civil court and won. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to ask that question. So yeah.
Well, and it didn't just happen in that case. It happened in happens in cases every day because the
Mm,
standard of proof is lower, right?
right.
Preponderance of the evidence in a civil case basically means 51%, more likely than not. Is this person responsible? More likely than not.
Got it.
Beyond a reasonable doubt is a very high standard. Is the
Mm,
highest standard we have in our law. It doesn't mean no doubt because nobody can know anything without any doubt, but
gotcha.
it's a very high standard that only holds folks accountable if there's a real burden of proof that's met. And that's why the O.J. Simpson case happened the way that it did, and many others as well.
And that yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, I'm not trying to relate the situation to the OJ case. I know that's like definitely a whole different situation, but again, I was just thinking in terms of criminal court, civil court for you know,
Right.
dealing with the same person. And that's what made me think about, this situation. But it may be something that the victims may be thinking about or may be considering. So that's why I wanted to put that out there and just, see what your thoughts were on that.
So it's possible they will pursue the civil case.
Mhm.
Certainly, I don't know any of the facts in any real detail.
Right.
Nobody really does, other than perhaps the investigators, and even then, that doesn't mean that they know what'll be admitted in court. So it's important to wait for that, and then they will make a determination. The key question in a civil case is, will I be able to recover money? And that's something that any potential plaintiff and their lawyers would have to look into.
God. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you explaining that. I know that there's probably going to be a whole lot more that comes from this situation because, like I said, I heard about this God, about 10 months ago. And even at that time, I was astounded by it. And at that time, it was just allegations. So here we are many, many months later where they have been indicted. And so this is a very serious situation that I will continue to watch and follow as more news comes about it. So as more situations arise in this case, I would love to, get your thoughts on it. So maybe we could, do this again when we get more details on this case. So
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
thank you so much, Dmitry. So, guys, thank you so much for being with us here on the Being Beautifully Honest channel. I am Beth. I appreciate you subscribing to his channel, subscribing to mine, liking this video. So, guys, as always, I just try my best to be beautifully honest. So, until the next time, I just wanted to keep it brief, beautiful, and now I'm going to say bye.